Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. According to a Pew Hispanic Center report, 5.5 million children in the United States live with a parent who is aspiring to be an American citizen, and approximately 4.5 million of these children are U.S. citizens. They live in constant fear that their parents, siblings, or guardians are going to be apprehended and forcibly removed from the country. My guest is Vicky Galbeca, Director of ACLU of New Mexico Regional Center for Border Rights. The American Civil Liberties Union of New Mexico and the Regional Center for Border Rights recently released a report, Torn Apart, How U.S. Immigration Policy Fragments New Mexico Families.
It was very painful to be away from him, and like I tell you, I was pregnant, so I had to pretty much, with the help of my parents and my family, raise my kid until he came. And then everything that we did revolved around immigration because of the process, so we couldn't really go on with our lives, so we just did our best, and that's why I just kept, I had project after project. So I did my bachelor's, and then I'm like, well, I might as well do my master's. But we made the best of it, but it's not, it wasn't the best experience. We wouldn't have given the police our status because they had no right to ask for us for our status, and we would have told them that, that they had no right. And we would have taken a traffic ticket for no license if they had a reason to, but they really didn't have a reason. They had just stopped us to ask about the accident. So if we had the opportunity, we wouldn't have said anything, because now we know that that wasn't supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to ask, but we didn't know any better, so we just kind of, gave them what they asked. And I think that's what people keep doing. They just, because they don't know any better. But now I wouldn't, give them anything. The country will just be better off if they provide the opportunity to educate all this, especially the young people, that the dreamers, they want to be, they've been here, they just weren't born here, but they grew up here.
Vicky, welcome to the program. The report is very unique in that it features stories of family separation in New Mexico. In these stories, we get to see what, in a lot of ways, are people coming out from behind the shadows. These people that have been directly impacted by immigration separation. How did this project come about?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't know if you know this, but I've lived along the border for about 25 years, and personally, my family has witnessed a great transformation along the border region. Since I started this job, we've been traveling from Brownsville to San Diego, and along the way we were asking people what were the things, how was border policy, specifically border enforcement policy, how was that affecting their lives? And the number one issue that kept coming up time and time again was this tragedy of family separation. So we decided, we need to get this story out there because it's not really clear to us that a lot of people in the interior of the United States really understand how this problem is manifesting itself at greater numbers along the border. I mean, you mentioned the 5.5 million children who have at least one parent who's an aspiring citizen and who have been unable to get their documents to stay united with their families. And certainly this is true along the U.S.-Mexico border, and we see that there's a large proportion of that number that's living along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Now, this report is very timely, as the debate of immigration reform or comprehensive immigration reform has taken place in the Senate and in the House and pretty much across the country. And one of the interesting things that I found in the report was that you refer to undocumented immigrants as aspiring citizens. Why is that?
Well, it's very intentional. I mean, I think that for a long time they've been using, the word is very powerful. And so I think that aspiring citizen actually truly reflects the situation that these people are in, as opposed to individuals who, are characterized as, unfortunately we've enacted all of these anti-immigrant policies by labeling people as being, illegal or undocumented or even criminals in some cases. However, the real reality is when you talk to individuals who come to this country, they're really about, moving this country forward. They're about finding better opportunity for their family members. They're about reuniting with their family members. And quite often, they have tried every avenue possible to become a citizen. But because of our immigration system, which hasn't been updated in decades, they're unable to become the legal citizens in this country. But by every other means, they're Americans. They're living in this country. They're contributing to our culture and to our economy. They just haven't been able to get those papers.
Well, as we look again, whatever term, whether it's aspiring citizens or undocumented immigrants, one of the things that I found in reading this is the different stories that are so compelling and have such almost shocking approaches to what's happened to some of these. I read the story about Anna, who's one of the was featured in the report. Could you maybe talk a little bit about her case?
Yeah, Anna is, and in many of these cases, we'll find that what happens is that a parent will get deported, and so what happens is then the grandparent winds up taking care of the children. And this is one of those cases where Julia, her daughter, who was actually an ROTC member in high school and was picked up and deported from the country. And so now here is Anna, who is dealing with her own medical conditions and her own challenges in life, having to take care of her grandchildren.
What other stories really stand out for you in this report?
I think what's so incredible about, and these are 9 families in New Mexico, but certainly there are thousands along the U.S.-Mexico border who are experiencing the same. And I think as part of this sort of bi-national, bi-cultural society that lives along the border, where we have families that are called mixed families, and in which we have U.S. citizens who are mixed with lawful permanent residents, people who have green cards, with people who are unable. So there's sort of this one family unit that is, all of these different kinds of statuses in that family. And somehow we're not prioritizing that family unity as part of our immigration process. And so that's a very important thing to do, particularly when we're talking about immigration reform. How do we preserve that family unity? How do we make it possible for these individuals who have been waiting for many, many years to process their paperwork? How do we make that possible for them? And I think the other, as I said, all the stories really stand out. But for me, one of the most heart-wrenching stories is when there was one case here that was north of here, a family that lives north of Las Cruces, who the grandmother, Marisol, was preparing his lunch for work. And he's a teenager who's going out to work in the fields because his father has died since age 12. He's been trying to help the family make ends meet. And the last thing she remembers is making this lunch for him while he's out working in the fields. And the next time she talks to him, he's 1,000 miles in Mexico, just a teenager. And had the thing like deferred action for childhood arrivals been enacted sooner, it's possible that he would have been able to stay here with his family, but now he's in Mexico and unable to come back.
Now, these stories, a story that stood out to me was the story of Adrian and Rafael. And it stood out for several different reasons, but both of them are aspiring citizens and whose mother and sister were deported. And what makes the story really stand out is that the deportation happened as a result of a routine traffic stop, where they were pulled over for not using a signal, and rather than them receiving a ticket because they had a lawful New Mexico driver's license. And next thing you know, they're being deported. How common is it in your research that you've done for these kinds of routine traffic stops to suddenly turn into a deportation? And is this not a case of racial profiling?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we're seeing that happen more and more, even here in New Mexico. I mean, of course, famous is Joe Arpaio in Maricopa County in Arizona. However, we're finding that throughout the border states, but also in the interior, there are more and more police officers who have forgotten that they've sworn an oath to protect the communities. They've sworn an oath to protect the communities that they serve, and instead are sort of handpicking who they're going to protect and who they're not. And in many cases, particularly in that case, and in this study, we found that more than half had actually resulted in deportation proceedings as a result of a traffic encounter. So it is happening at an alarming rate. And in many of these cases, they already had a New Mexico driver's license, a valid New Mexico driver's license. So it does seem like it's racial profiling, because certainly this is not happening to everybody in New Mexico. It's people who fit a certain profile and where the person believes that this person is here without papers.
What is a common sense approach, and is there one, that the U.S. government should take to address the issue of immigration separation, since a lot of these cases involve U.S. citizens? You have parents that are suddenly abandoning U.S. citizens here in this country because they're minors.
Right. I mean, I think that a common sense approach would be one that actually values family unity. I mean, I think that family is a core American value, and I think that as we're in the process of looking at our system, and hopefully if we do get immigration reform this year, we'll be able to preserve that family unity in it, because it just makes sense. These people, many of these individuals have been here for decades, and they've already been making enormous contributions to our culture and our society and our economy. And it's just a question of ensuring that they're here with papers so they can also get access to the other protections that are available to lawful permanent residents and U.S. citizens.
You recommend that detained immigrants or aspiring citizens should have the right to a government-appointed attorney. And what do you say to those that argue that because they are not here legally, that they do not qualify to have the same rights as a U.S. citizen?
I don't want to get too wonkish about this, but I think that there is a distinction between criminal courts and civil courts. And in criminal cases, individuals do have the right to appointed counsel. But in civil cases, they don't have that right to be appointed. And immigration law falls in civil courtrooms. That's the arena in which, or the courtroom in which the determination is made about their status in this country. However, I think that in many situations the consequences are so severe, the family separation, the effect on the children, the effect on the siblings and other family members, the effect on our own local economies when we're just engaging in this enforcement-only model. These are severe consequences that we need to we need to put that in the balance of providing counsel to individuals. And in some cases, some of these individuals are in process of getting their paperwork through the civil process. They get stopped by a police officer and immediately sent to deportation proceedings without an opportunity to even call their immigration lawyer to show to the Border Patrol agent that they do have eligibility, that they have some kind of relief to be in this country. They don't have that opportunity, then they wind up being deported. And sometimes those deportations come with bars, 5 to 10-year bars, and they're unable to return to this country, even if prior to being deported, they were already in process of getting their paperwork.
Well, you know, again, as part of the process of deportation or being arrested, you know, once an aspiring citizen is detained, apprehended, there's a process that's set in motion. And part of this process is getting the person to sign voluntary return forms. And in case after case, you know, that are read here, they were made to sign these, and often without any kind of legal consultation. Mm-hmm. And they literally waive their legal rights and agree to deportation. What kind of pressure is applied for undocumented immigrants to sign these voluntary forms?
Well, we've seen several kinds of sort of coercive measures. We've seen that sometimes they threaten them with family separation by separating them, like for example, if 2 family members are picked up and then being processed for repatriation. They're told that if they don't sign the voluntary return or the voluntary departure, that they will be separated. Or they tell them, we'll go, if you don't sign this paper, we'll go and pick up your son and deport him. Or they're using some sort of coercive measures, as opposed to saying, following a different approach, which would be to really do a survey of their eligibility for immigration relief, and to see also use prosecutorial discretion or some kind of mechanism to ensure that they can stay with their family members. And the reality is, we do have that discretion, and immigration officials do have that discretion, and so they need to be better trained and better informed about when or not to offer this departure to these individuals, these voluntary returns. In many of the cases, they don't offer them voluntary returns at all. In fact, what they do is something very different. They actually refer them for criminal charges in our federal courthouses. And that becomes a whole other complicated mess for people in this situation to figure out how to reunite with their family members.
What kind of future, you know, is set for the families that were highlighted in this report? You know, if there's like, you know, how many of them have been reunited? How many of them look forward to being reunited? And, you know, how realistic is it? What's the future look like for them?
Well, it's very difficult. However, I am happy to report that one of the family members were able to jump through all the hoops to get their citizenship and to reunite. In fact, one of them has U.S. citizenship, and the other one recently gained lawful permanent citizenship, residency. But even still, even after they went through that whole process, of course, they're very happy about being reunited and being together again. Imagine the effect of being separated from your family members for 6 years or more in order to come back together. I mean, particularly on children. Children are deeply affected by this separation, to be away from their father or from their mother, to be away from both of their parents, to be away from their siblings. It's almost like experiencing a death in the family, because they have to readjust and everything changes. Even their economic situation changes sometimes. And in many cases, we saw that for children, their achievements in school, their academic achievements actually were affected by these separations.
Earlier you mentioned that there has not been comprehensive immigration reform in a long time. It's actually been mid-'80s since the last time there were some changes made to the law. Are you hopeful that comprehensive immigration reform will pass this year?
Well, we've been trying this for a number of years. I think that when I talk to my colleagues who are trying to ensure that immigration reform, this year it seems like one of the more likelier one of all the years in the past couple of years. And I think we'll have to see. I think it'll be crucial to see what happens in the House side. And, well, of course, it seems pretty likely that we will get a Senate bill. However, one of the concerns that we have in general about immigration reform is that, of course, we want a pathway to citizenship. Of course, we want family unity. But what we don't really need more of is more border enforcement resources. And unfortunately, a lot of the rhetoric that we have around immigration reform is more border security, more border enforcement, and all that as a condition.
Has that border security increased over, I mean, again, it's been discussed, this rhetoric of immigration policies have been going on for a long time, and it just seems that border security has increased over the last 10 years. And if you look at the deportations under the current administration, it seems to have increased, yet you hear those arguments saying we need to do more to improve border security. And again, it just seems that it seems part of the rhetoric.
Yeah, I think we actually feel it is an unnecessary obstacle. I mean, all of the immigration reform proposals that have been introduced to date have included border enforcement metrics, and all of them have been met. And yet, there's this insistence on moving the goalposts and making it more secure and more border patrol agents and more this, more that. And sometimes it just makes one wonder, is this really an obstacle for immigration reform? Is this a clever way for us never to get there? Is there a way for us to really just acknowledge and say, we need to look at the picture more holistically and really understand that part of border security might even include legalization. It might even include creating a better system for people who want to come to this country to work or to reunite with their families. That might actually add to our border security as well.
I heard recently from the president say that quote, we're not going to get everything we want, a perfect bill, and or perfect legislation. What do you feel would really hurt the chances of this becoming law and actually being passed this year on either side that would hurt the chances?
I think the only thing that's really going to hurt is political will. I mean, I think that there has to be a real dedication and commitment to ensure that immigration reform happens this year, and to figure out creatively. I mean, maybe even think outside of the box and think of really what the long-term benefits are for this country for immigration reform. And I think those benefits could be huge. They could be an improvement for not just immigrants, but for all Americans in this country to have a good immigration reform package that's not too punitive or too impossible. We can't make it impossible for people to become citizens, because we may as well not offer them anything at all if we're making it impossible. So I think really we need to ask ourselves, what do we want? Where do we want our country to be? How can we move our country forward on this? And then, and what would and really make an assessment of all the benefits that would be derived from fair and just immigration reform.
This report, again, it's called Torn Apart: How U.S. Immigration Policy Fragments New Mexico Families. Where can people get access to this report?
It's on our website, and do you want me to say it?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's www.aclu-nm as in New Mexico.org. You can find that on our website.
Again, reading this report, it was very well done in that I've never seen something that really looked at some, as I mentioned from earlier, was people coming in from behind the shadows. How difficult was it to talk to them and get them to be pictured and have their faces put in writing in this report?
Well, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to come out. There's a lot of fear. They're afraid not just of the repercussions to themselves, but to other family members. And so it took us about a year or so to get about 9 families to be willing to come forward and tell their
And I'm
stories.
pretty sure it could have been longer, if there had been more people been willing to talk. Because again, it just seems that these cases are a lot to be discussed. Well, Vicki, I want to thank you very much for coming in
Thank you.
today to Fronteras, A Changing America, and certainly it's a debate, conversation that can go on for quite a long time. So thank you very much for coming in, and thank you for watching Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez.